is kids' access to the arts generally, but music in particular, and that's very personal. I found my place, and actually growing up in Australia in the 70s, 80s, as you know, I didn't know or wasn't conscious of it at the time, but as a gay kid, finding my place there was really important. This is a very special organisation, and I I stand on the shoulders of those who came before. It's grown up over a long period of time. The festival started in 1967, but figuring out how a large organisation can actually have a bigger impact on its community and serve its community in all sorts of ways is really what has made me tick over the last decade or so. The definition of the business is about bringing people together. Everything that we do is designed to get a load of people in the same space, and that was the very thing that COVID prevented. It's amazing then to think, actually, it sort of was October 2021 before we were back open in the concert hall. It's a journey back for the audience, because 2020 totally cancelled. 21 was a socially distanced festival. 22 we were back, but still at a slightly smaller scale. 23 feels like the moment where we're maybe returned to something which is much more reminiscent of the pre-pandemic years. So yeah, that's exciting.
What is your one rule for living a fulfilled life?
Ultimately, most people, the vast majority, I think, are trying to do good things and the right thing, and if you hold on to that somehow, then it gives you faith and energy in everything else. You can make things possible after that. So yeah, optimism and have faith in people.
I believe everyone has a story to tell. Through seeking true, authentic insights about the entrepreneurial journey, I provide a platform for our peers to share their stories and inspire those that listen. This is the County Business Talks podcast, produced by H2 Productions. Brilliant. Okay, welcome to another episode of the County Business Talks podcast. My guest this week is widely acknowledged to be one of the most influential cultural leaders in the UK, following a distinguished career in classical music with both senior artistic and executive management credits. In 2008, he was appointed Chief Executive of both Brighton Dome and Brighton International Festival. Delighted to welcome Andrew Comben to the podcast. How are you, Andrew? You okay?
Hi, Sam. Great to be here. Great to see you.
Excellent. Really great to meet you, and I'm delighted to have you on. Obviously, I heard so much about and obviously seen what's been happening with the festival over the years, and obviously some exciting stuff going on at the moment, obviously at the Dome and Corn Exchange and stuff. So yeah, really excited to have you on.
Oh no, look, it's brilliant to be here, and it's a fantastic place to be, isn't it? I mean, Brighton is such a special city, and yeah, I'm just struck as you introduced there that it is 15 years that I've been in this role. So yeah, it'd be great to have a chat.
Lovely, amazing. Well, look, we're going to dive straight in and just tell, as you start your stories, just sort of tell me a little bit about what sort of life was growing up for you, and tell me something about obviously those early years that's maybe shaped who you are today.
Sure, I'm. Well, I don't know if you know, but I'm Australian and was born in Sydney, went to school later on in Melbourne. I sound like this mainly because I grew up singing as a kid. And yeah, we were taught to sing in a particular way, and so I got this accent. But yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm really passionate about now is kids' access to the arts generally, but music in particular, and that's very personal because I grew up in a state school in Sydney with parents who liked music but were not especially musical, and certainly didn't work in the industry or the business. And it was entirely down to teachers in a primary school in a little state primary school in Sydney that switched me on to music and gave me huge opportunities, which I can rabbit on about forever. But that really meant I found my place, and actually growing up in Australia in the 70s, 80s, as you know, I didn't know or wasn't conscious of it at the time, but as a gay kid, finding my place there was really important in the end, and it certainly set me on this track.
Amazing. It's interesting, isn't it? I find I talk about a lot on here about sort of education and what it's like in school. I grew up in Dagenham, in not the greatest school in the world, but I just think that for me that finding that right teacher or that inspiration at a young age, because so many of us unfortunately don't have that passion, find that passion early on. I guess like listening to you talk about that your passion for music and the arts was from an early age. You found that
it started really early, 7, 8, I suppose. I mean, maybe earlier than that, but certainly in formal senses. We, lots of. What's annoying though was it was lots of luck, and I think what I've tried to do over the years is see if there's a way of making that less down to luck and chance, and put structures in place that give as many kids an opportunity as possible. We happened to have, as one of the parents in the school, a bass trombonist from Sydney Symphony Orchestra. He decided he wanted to start a band, and so he gave all his spare time to running this brass band for kids. It was an amazingly altruistic thing to do and generous thing to do, and he taught a load of us from the word go. But there were a couple of teachers in the school as well who really knew their stuff and wanted to encourage some of us to keep going at it, and that opened all sorts of doors, from singing at the opera as a kid, and all sorts of other things. And it was
what's that experience like at a young age, singing at the opera?
Amazing. I mean, I've always said that actually singing with one of the things as singing as a child is if you're singing in kids' choirs, that's one thing. But when you're in a professional setting, whether that's the opera or musicals or whatever, you're treated as an adult, and that's the first time as an 8, 9, 10-year-old that you're really given the responsibility and the expectation of delivering in the same way that all of your colleagues who are adults are being expected to deliver, and there's something about that I think which is really special. It makes you feel really good, but it's also slightly terrifying, and that's quite useful as well. It's a really good learning, growing experience.
Because that just builds so many life skills. I liken it. I wasn't very musical at all at school, but very sporty. So you sort of get potentially that type of thing from sport as well. That
Definitely.
Where you're playing within a group of people, maybe playing with older kids or whatever that looks like. But you like you say, you grow in confidence, especially if you've got a bit of a talent for that, and it just helps to lift you up. And like I say, it gives you. What sport gave me was a lot of life skills, I guess, that changing room banter, for example, or just being in an environment where you're accepted in that way for what you're, I guess, good at or what you achieve.
Yeah, there are so many things that, I think many in education have known this for years and have been fostering it in different ways. Doesn't necessarily flow through the curriculum in a formal sense, but I think there are just the start of flickers of recognition from government and elsewhere that actually these subjects are really important. And there's, I think, sport is a really good comparison, because often the arts and sport are put in sort of competition almost for time and so on. But whatever switches a kid on to something is hugely powerful, and for me it was music, which of course then I'm biased and want to spread that as widely as I can.
What's your take then on the way the education system is now, the curriculum, and how that sort of works within schools? Because obviously, like listening to you talk like that, obviously there's that passion for music and what that gave you, and do do you feel that we have the way the curriculum is still quite archaic in that sense, that the way that we teach, with maths, for example, being something that we're going to stay on now and teach our kids to 18? Do you think that needs to be looked at?
I think it's really tough. I mean, Brighton Dome Brighton Festival took on the operation of the Brighton Hove Music Service and the East Sussex Music Service. We've created a new music hub called Create Music, and that works in around 270 schools across the region. So we're teaching 5,000 kids music a week, and it's really exciting to see what all of those kids are doing and how the schools and teachers are supporting them. But there's no doubt that it often comes from commitment of the head teacher and staff in schools to make that happen and allow it to happen. And they're fighting against the curriculum often in terms of the expectations that are put on the schools to deliver certain subjects in certain ways, and the amount of time that simply doesn't exist then to go outside of those strictures, I think, is really tough. So I've lots and lots of sympathy for teachers who are often then told by successive governments and politicians that they should be going in this direction or that direction. It chops and changes a lot, and really it's certainly in this region down to the sort of long-term commitment of teachers and head teachers that we're able to do the sorts of things that we're able to do. So yeah, I think it definitely needs more recognition that there is a much broader spectrum of learning than the core subjects. I completely respect the need to focus on those core subjects, but equally a broad-based curriculum is I think really healthy for every child. It's really tough to set policy around that though, and often the teachers and individual schools are the best placed to know what's right for their kids. So yeah, it's a thorny issue, but I think there is amazing work that goes on down here.
I agree. It's great to hear you talk, because I'm passionate about that as well, and I talk about it on here quite a lot. But and I feel really bad actually for the teachers, because you do feel like they have got such a tough job to follow this curriculum, and they've got these Ofsted reports that they've got to meet and certain criteria, which is tough. And that, but I really believe that all kids engage in different ways. We talked about it just before off air, like people absorb content in different ways, whether it be a podcast or reading a book or whatever that looks like. So actually realising, I think, that children, we engage in different ways. I've talked a couple of times on here. I've got twins who are 7, so there's obviously a natural comparison between the two of them because they're the same age. But Sienna's very academic and she takes after my wife, and she's excellent at reading, whereas Luca's a bit more maybe creative and doesn't quite engage in that way. But actually, the way they've been tested at school, even at 7, which is crazy, Luca got sort of labelled a little bit as behind, and I'm like, I really don't buy into that, and it sort of frustrated me a little bit. And I spoke to the teacher. I said, I think he just engages maybe, and he's really creative. So he loves music, and I'm not very musical, but he does love that, and he loves performing and like the theatre sort of side of stuff, and he's really passionate about that, and drawing and the art side of stuff and that's how he engaged. And I think, like you said, I completely appreciate how tough it must be within schools and the curriculum, but actually for government and people at the top to look at it being a broader thing will hopefully the future will be brighter with that.
I think so, yeah.
I think awesome. Well, look, so tell me then, and then so you moved. When did you move over to England? When you was? Yeah,
I came to UK in 94, late 93, 94.
Yeah.
So I was in my early 20s at the time, and really didn't know anyone. I just knew I wanted to be here and wanted to pursue, at the time, horn playing and singing, and fell into that. Met lots of people along the way, and was brilliantly supported by lots of people connecting me to each other. It's the arts can be great for that. it's a brilliant network, and not always as supportive as it could be, but I happened to fall on my feet and was introduced to some great people, and then fell into the administration side of things, which I'd never planned at all, but it felt right, and I went with it.
And something you obviously, like you say, I guess finding a role, whatever that looks like, within something you're passionate about. So whether it be the arts, whether it be sport or whatever that is, you might necessarily, like for me, I never made it as a professional footballer, but one of the other businesses I run is related to five-a-side football, so that's great, and I've sort of experienced, so actually being involved within classical music as you was, obviously, but then, like you say, the admin side of it, and then coming down, I guess, to Brighton and taking over the festival and stuff.
Yeah, it had never occurred to me while I was doing it early on that actually what I was storing up was a kind of bank of experience of what it meant to be on stage, and even if I wasn't pursuing that professionally as an adult, I did for a bit, but what I had was a kind of empathy, a ready sense of what that took for people. So it came quite naturally to get alongside artists and understand what they were trying to do, and then translate that for other people who were working behind the scenes, and sort of there's that sort of brokering relationship that is really valuable to both sides, to an artist and to the business side. And if you can marry the two, then it's great fun, but it's also hopefully useful, and it meant I sort of found my niche.
Yeah, because I guess, like you say, the experience that you had of playing where you did, and as a child, and obviously, like you say, as an adult, being able to take that experience, and like you say, I guess interesting to hear you say about actually being able to empathise with other artists and actually put yourself in that position and understand where they're coming from. Because I can imagine if potentially you hadn't been like that, and you look at it from a business side of things, don't necessarily see from the artist side, from other people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not at all unique. There are people who do this brilliantly across the arts industry. That's what makes great producers, and there are many that work both in our organisation and then in many others. But I was sort of struck early on that had never occurred to me as a thing. I didn't know that existed as a career choice, as it were. So again, it's sort of that's something that we've tried to focus a bit on within Brighton Dome, Brighton Festival, just for people to understand what kinds of roles and careers exist for young people, so that they can actually know that pursuing a creative subject is not necessarily the dead end that many people try and paint it as. Unless you're going to be winning a Grammy, what's the point? Well, actually, there are lots of reasons to pursue creative subjects. They give you life skills, but they also lead to real jobs in other ways.
Yeah, I think that's something, again, back to, I guess, the education side of it and careers. I guess actually opening the opportunities for children to look at that there are other avenues for them to follow. Like you said, if there's something that they're passionate about, but and again, I'm relating it to sport because that's my world. But I guess similar to that, if I'm not going to make it as a professional footballer, do I just stop playing football? Or do I stop playing tennis or whatever that sport is? Actually, no. You could go into coaching. You could go into broadcasting within that industry. And I guess similar with the arts as well. Like, I'm not going to become a musician and win a Grammy, but there are all these other, so many, especially within arts and culture, so many different positions and different roles that they could do.
Definitely.
Yes, and So tell me then about, obviously, then coming down to Brighton in 2008 and the inspiration behind that and wanting to get behind that. And
I know you keep saying 2008. I know.
15 years. Yeah, we won't dwell on that.
No, but it's been great. I mean, I really love it, and it's and it's brilliant to look back on as well, because this is a very special organisation, and I I stand on the shoulders of those who came before. It's grown up over a long period of time. The festival started in 1967, and each director of the festival and all the teams that have put those festivals together have made something really extraordinary in a place which deserves something extraordinary, because it's a really wonderful city, and it's we were talking off air as well, just the natural environment that we have and that we enjoy here, the microclimate that's here, the sort of sense of wanting to be outside, but also the closeness that the city can allow. So you can get lots of people to different parts of it quite quickly, and all of the sort of cultural richness that is here means it's really ripe as a festival city. It's perfect for a celebration of arts and culture. So to inherit the legacy of Brighton Festival is a huge privilege, and was really daunting when I arrived in 2008 to think, actually, how could we do something with not just with the festival, but with this unique combination of extraordinary venues. The Dome, which is originally built for the Prince Regent and for his horses, but turned into a concert hall, and the riding school, which was then become the Corn Exchange, and the Studio Theatre. How could we marry those two things together and make something even larger and even more impactful in a place like this? So that took a lot of wrapping my head around. I was I was immediately full of ideas in arriving in 2008, but the more and more I got under the skin of the place and understood how things work, the differences that exist here from London or from Suffolk, where I was prior to London, or indeed Australia, has been really, really useful, and I've loved actually putting roots down in a place that means you gradually start to understand the community that we exist in, and understand how a cultural institution like ours can play a bigger part than just simply putting on good shows. That's brilliant. We love doing that, and I love working with artists to make that happen. But figuring out how a large organisation can actually have a bigger impact on its community and serve its community in all sorts of ways is really what has made me tick over the last decade or so. That's been really exciting.
It's amazing. Just a couple of things taken out of that what you're saying, and I agree. I think I've come down to Brighton from Essex 2012. I moved down, so just over 10 years, and I do find it's such a unique, magical place, Brighton. I've fallen in love with it very much so, and I think there's the sense of community here, especially I find it very much so within the business community, especially, and keen to get your thoughts on that from the sort of cultural but the business community is an amazing place. People want to support and work together, and collaboration is a big thing. I think has come out of, especially more so out of after lockdown, and sort of moved along. People even more open to working together and supporting each other, and for the greater good of the city and for their own business as well. So yeah, I'm keen to get your sort of take on that from the business point of view.
Definitely. I mean, I think it is somewhere that people want to make things happen. And many people have been motivated to move here, from almost an idealistic sense of how do you create a really great place to live, and so I feel like lots and lots of people are invested in that, from whatever take they come at that, whether that's business, as you say, or sport, or the arts, or local government, or whatever the lens is that you look through. I think there really are amazing people who want to try and do something extraordinary here. So yeah, we really love the sort of surprising partnerships that can spring up. From arts working with health, or indeed working with sport. Working with highways, there's all sorts of different agencies and organisations, if you like, that come together, and then one of the really rich things for us has been, particularly through the festival, but also year round, finding those businesses who absolutely get the sense that a cultural organisation is not just about what goes on stage, but can have a real role to play in their own business and making that a much richer and more profitable experience for everyone. So, whether that's just about actually promoting it to more people, or indeed working with young people on developing their skills. And so particularly through lockdown, actually, we started working with the Department of Work and Pensions, with Kickstart apprenticeships, and I think we brokered around 120 apprentices and work placements for something like 40 organisations across the city, and that was just brilliant, because, and continues to be brilliant, because I think it again, it unlocks that idea of what a creative education is for, and what creative skills are all about, but that they can be applied to all sorts of businesses across the community. And then we really love getting to know those businesses who suddenly find, oh, there's something over there that you're doing that we could be involved in, and vice versa. So I think those conversations happen down here in a way that I'm not sure they happen as easily elsewhere. Maybe that's something about, again, being close together, easy to get round. But I think it's something about the attitude and the spirit as well, which is really great.
I agree. I think actually you're right. Just maybe the attitude, Danny. People just seem to be open-minded to community collaboration, whatever those things are. But just coming together, open-minded to have that conversation. The amount of people I will just reach out to, and you go. You go to sometimes to a meeting with no real agenda other than to just let's have a chat about, bounce some ideas around, and sometimes great things come from that. And I think if you're open-minded to those opportunities, that's what I really get the sense of that down here. Like since I've been here and running a business, I really get the sense of that down here.
Definitely. I mean, I know that it also drives some people crazy that actually we can talk an awful lot and for ages and then never. I mean, the accusation would be, well, you never actually get on the new stuff. But I think that's sometimes true. But actually, investing the time in talking always pays off eventually, one way or another. I think that exchange and the opportunity to see where a connection might take you is a really great thing.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, we obviously, you mentioned a little bit there about obviously lockdown and sort of apprenticeships and stuff that you did through there. But I'm obviously, I talk a lot about the podcast about challenges that we face as chief executive of the Dome and obviously the festival. Talk to me a little bit about your mindset around March 2020 when Boris gets on the screen and talks about the pandemic, and where's your head at that point? And
yeah, it's really interesting to look back over that time, isn't it? And I think everyone's experience of lockdown was probably traumatic in all sorts of ways. I'm really struck by the memory of a few days earlier. We were still we were still delivering performances in the concert hall, and there was that weekend just prior to lockdown, which was that on the Monday or the Tuesday, and I definitely remember standing in the foyer and with some of our team and saying there's something about this that just doesn't feel right. You know, the conversation had been going for a number of weeks by that stage about you know, the growth of COVID and its spread, and having that many people in a space, it felt sort of vulnerable for everybody there, including the staff team. So in some ways, when lockdown was finally called, although that was a massive impact, it also felt a relief that at least there was clarity for everybody, that our sort of frontline staff weren't going to be in such a vulnerable position. Of course, then the rest of it was you immediately turned to what do we do now, and how do we make this big ship of an organisation work and survive through you know, when the definition of the business is about bringing people together.
Yeah.
You know, everything that we do is designed to get a load of people in the same space, and that was the very thing that COVID prevented. So I'm really proud of the way the team responded, and particularly grateful for an amazing board of trustees and a senior team who were just immediately responsive and also far-sighted. So we had some trustees at the time who were particularly connected into the thinking around epidemiology and what was going on. And of course, that was a big whirl of information and in some ways lack of clarity. But I really remember one trustee saying, "This is going to go on, and it's going to go on for a while, and it's going to be massive, and we need to think about how we respond, not just in the short term, but in the medium to long term.
Yeah, sure.
And you know, what kinds of measures are going to be needed, and so on." And that was amazing advice to have in March 2020. You know, it was way before it was sort of really becoming public consciousness. And so from that point, we started to think, okay, well, what if this isn't just 3 months or 6 months? What if it's 18 months? We dared to think about the 18-month impact of lockdown on the organisation, and could we find a way through? And what would we do in the meantime? And how would we fund it? And yeah, it's amazing then to think, actually, it sort of was October 2021 before we were back open in the concert hall. And so it was that 18-month period. And that was that was quite an arbitrary line in the sand that we drew, but amazingly, one of the principles that we started with was that, okay, if it is that long, that's going to be a huge impact on the organisation, but we'll still be there, and we'll want to be serving our audiences and our communities when we're back. That's going to need a really brilliant, knowledgeable, skilled staff team, and the last thing we want to do is go through some program of redundancies that would serve the short-term benefit of the organisation, perhaps, but then longer term really scupper its ability to return. So the fundamental principle that we started out with was, how do we protect everybody's jobs through that time?
Because was there always a belief, like even in those early stages, that it is just going to be, whether it be 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever that looks like, I still believe that we're going to get back to where we were before? Or was there a doubt in, because it was, you talk to other people within the community, and I think it was so unknown for so many. The uncertainty was there, but especially from, I was like, I remember my brother messaging me he lives in Australia now, but messaging me and saying, you know what, I think it was like the 25th anniversary of Nebworth, the concert with Oasis fans. But he's like, can you imagine, like, not actually, I wonder if that's ever going to happen again.
Will this never happen?
Will it ever? And was that ever discussed? Was there ever that thought process, or was it just the belief that we are going to return, and when we do, we need to have everyone in place to do that?
Yes, I think so. I mean, we definitely went through periods of it's a question of how long. And that how long might be 5 years, it might be 10 years, but there will. I think we had to hold on to a sort of fairly fundamental belief that actually people will always want to come together. So there will have to be a solution to this, whatever it is, whether it's medical, whether it's technological, whether it's architectural. There will have to be ways. A solution. Enable us. And I remember being pointed to an article quite early on, which was a historian looking at what happened in New York and London in between 1918 and 1923, so those 5 years, during the period of the Spanish flu. And it's amazing to look 100 years on, to look at just how similar that experience was for theatres. So, suddenly they were shut down. There was massive hysteria. There was lots of promotion of mask wearing, and then the way that theatres came back at that point, in 1921-22, was to really advertise how brilliant their new air conditioning was and how fresh the air was in their theatres. But it clearly took a period of 3, 4, 5 years before audiences had the confidence to return to those spaces in the same sort of way. So we were kind of thinking that could be in the ether, but never wanted to let go of the idea that performance wouldn't happen again, and so it was a matter of just how do we steer through that and try and build a business model that could cope and be dynamic enough and flexible enough to cope. And as I say, the entire staff team were just brilliant at coming together around that and feeling actually we are kind of stronger together. If we need to change how things work, then let's do it as a group, rather than be in the lifeboat situation and throwing some overboard to save a few. That never felt like the right approach for us.
And it's really, I'm really keen to touch on then about, I guess, the culture within the organisation at the Dome, the festival, and as a leader and the people that you within your management team and the people you speak to. Like, that's a great sense of a strong culture. I talk about it from a business point of view all the time, that it's almost a bloodline to any business is a strong foundation and a strong culture there. So is that something you've consciously developed over your time at the Dome and the festival over the last 15 years? That like leading up to that, because to create that when you get to a point where it is a real struggle and actually we're really up against it here, but wow, we've all come together because we've got this strong family culture, I guess, almost, that we're going to come together as a team and we'll get through this together.
Yeah, I mean, I was struck really from the very start that there were people working at the Dome who had been there for 20 years at that point. And and of course some are no longer working with us, but there are others that have then been there for more than 20 years. And so there's this long loyalty and consistency of some, with then brilliantly new people joining all the time. But that sense of, I think theatres generally often have a very strong culture anyway, because there's something about handing on that sense of what has been there before, treading the boards and all of that kind of legend does actually ring true when you're in a space. Artists are very aware of who else has performed there, but the team is really aware of that, proud of it, and kind of protective of it. So what grows up around the performing space is quite special anyway.
Yeah, sure.
Finding a way to kind of harness that or galvanise it and point it in a particular direction can sometimes be a challenge, because often different bits of the organisation will have different ideas about what's more important than others, and bringing music education into that and creating a sort of unified sense has also been something that we've really wanted to work on. But yeah, I think culture's interesting, isn't it? I mean, ultimately, it's down to the people who make it, and I've never particularly been one for the management speak that grows up around all of that. But I think being as straight as you can be with people and just building a sense of trust and loyalty between each other, so that actually when the chips are down you can have an honest conversation and say, I really think this is the way forward. Are you with me? People respond to that, I think.
Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to say something about one of our sponsors, EMC Corporate Finance. Trust must be earned, especially in business. It goes both ways and takes time to build. That's why you need an advisor with a proven track record who understands its value and, more importantly, the value you place on your business. EMC Corporate Finance is built on a legacy of trust. For over 30 years, they've been advising and supporting entrepreneurs, guiding them through the challenges of private company ownership. Whether you're looking to raise investment, accelerate growth, or crystallise value with a profitable exit, the team are here to help. So if you're ready to take that next step, let EMC be your guide. For more information, go to www.emcltd.co.uk. Okay, back to the podcast. That's amazing, and the one thing as well, I'd be keen to just tap in, I guess, to your mindset and from an emotional point of view as well. How you felt like with it as a team, as an organisation, when you do come through there. You go to October 21, and that first show back in the concert hall. Talk to me about that moment and those. Yeah,
there were a series of special moments, really, and they kept on coming in different waves and different ways. The team pivoted incredibly to do things online. So there was the kind of whoosh that came from cancelling a festival, which was soul destroying, to then delivering stuff online and getting the audience reaction. Then to when we put all of the measures in place to be able to do things in a socially distanced way, whether that was outdoors or then the first performance that we did in the Dome with a maximum 300 capacity on cabaret seating with numbered tables and everyone having to keep their chairs in a particular format and enter and exit in a certain way and so on. I mean, it was just it was insane the level of detail that the staff team had to go through to make those things happen. So when they did, there was and to have artists there who hadn't been able to perform at all and suddenly were able to, and were as grateful as they were to be able to, was really amazing. But then you're right, when there were, for the first time, when there were 1,800 people in the dome again and able to really lift the roof off, they did, and it's an amazing space for that whenever it happens.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was something very emotional when it did finally come.
I guess from someone that's very much a people person, I love being in and around PR. I run networking groups, and I'm members of lots of networking groups. And you go and I've done lots online, as we all did, and we survived. And Zoom was, a saviour for many businesses. And you sort of get on back, but just ultimately, I think as human beings, we crave that human connection and being around people. And actually, I still remember that first sort of. There was an event, a friend of mine, Ryan Hill, runs Best of British events, and fantastic events. And that first one back at the Grand, 500 people in there, where you sort of. It was all come together. And it was an emotion in that room that day, thinking, I wondered 18 months ago whether we'd actually ever be here again. But especially from an arts and culture point of view, a show, going to see a show is a magical experience anyway, and being around people, being in an atmosphere that can only be created within the concert hall that must have just been like, for someone leading an organisation like that, it must have been just an incredible moment.
Yeah, very proud to be part of that. What I really remember was it striking me, it's so obvious, and part of me had always known it. But over that period where we'd been at home, listening to stuff fine, but on home sound systems or through the laptop or whatever, being in a room and feeling the physical experience of a sound system and a performance, it's actually it's a physical thing. It's not just an oral thing. It doesn't happen just between your ears. It's kind of hitting you in the chest, and that was amazing because it really struck me as if kind of for the first time that was an amazing thing. And so I still hold on to that, really, the power of live, which is, yes, it's about coming together, but it's also about being in the room and the air moving in the room. It's not just on your laptop at home.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, that's amazing, and it's so great to, like you say, to be where we are now and back to, thankfully some form of what we, I guess, call normality or whatever, because it's. Because, like you say, you go back to. I spoke to Julian Caddy on here recently about Fringe as well, and him talking about that period and thinking, it's scary times and for everyone, but especially within arts and culture, and with the thought of. Because all the supply chain, everything that comes with organising events at the large scale that the festival's at, and all the people involved and everyone down that line, and that impacts so much on a great scale, doesn't it? Like, it's not just the actual venue, but all the people that actually behind the scenes of an event and what that looks like.
Definitely, there are thousands of people that implicated, and the sudden stopping of all of that, particularly on people who work as freelance and creative workers and associated workers, was a huge impact. I'm really grateful to have been part of an organisation through that period. For those colleagues who were freelance, it was a really, really scary time, and very difficult to know how best to navigate that. And although, as you say, we're through it now, we're still dealing with the aftermath, and there are also some things that we all promised each other during it wouldn't necessarily go back the way they were, and that we'd try and make things differently and work in different ways. So I don't think we're at all near the finish of that yet. That's still a project that we all have to work on, which is to how to kind of level the playing field for people who are independent workers and those who are part of organisations. There's lots of work to do to make sure that we're even better partners in the future.
Sure. Look, I just want to move on to obviously running a festival of the size of Brighton Festival and the Dome as well. I imagine comes with quite a lot of pressures. I guess talk to me a little bit about away from. What do you do to switch off? Are you able to switch off, especially leading into May when festivals on? Are you able to switch off, or what do you do outside?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I can switch off. I sleep really well, which has always been a huge bonus. But you were saying you've 7-year-old twins. I have a 7-year-old son, and so he keeps us busy, and actually it's the best way of switching off, isn't it? Because stuff comes from you don't know where and left field, and it's completely absorbing. So I love that, and whether that's just playing together or being out and doing the things that he loves to do, and that provides a kind of antidote to whatever's going on. But equally, there are some things you don't want to switch off from. It's because actually the arts is what I love, and being in those performances is a huge privilege, and something that means it might be work related, but you're given the opportunity to take your mind in a different direction. So that always kind of feeds you, and it's great fun. So I'm looking forward to May.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I get ultimately the key about that, and anyone listening and everyone I talk to that comes on the podcast, ultimately, if you do something you love doing, that work-life. There was such a thing previously, and we still talk about a lot of work-life balance and what does that look like. And actually, a good friend of mine who come on recently described it quite well. Actually, it's just life as a whole, and work's involved in that, and personal life's involved in that, and it's all just in one big bubble, actually. And as long as you're doing your best you can in all of those elements, you that's how you keep it going. It's not that work's there and that's my work life, and then it's and home life's over there, and it's completely separate. Actually, they all come together, and
and it's obviously different for everybody, isn't it?
Of course.
But for me, the idea of separating those two things has never really felt right or necessary, because, as you say, it's the thing that I really love.
Nice. So talk me a little. Obviously, we're recording this now, what sort of February, so May is coming round sooner, I'm sure, than you think, and the festival all going to plan this year, and exciting. And
yeah, well, I mean, we're launching in the next couple of weeks, so I can't talk about the programme too much, unfortunately. Sure. But it is really exciting. I think it has come together really well this year. It's brilliant to be working with as many partners as we are in the festival, and to get that kind of response, both from artistic organisations, but also business organisations, that this is a really special time of year, and there's something worth making the extra effort to come together on. So we're really thrilled with the way it's come together, and I also think it's a journey back for the audience, because 2020 totally cancelled. 21 was a socially distanced festival. 22 we were back, but still at a slightly smaller scale. 23 feels like the moment where we're maybe returned to something which is much more reminiscent of the pre-pandemic years. So that's exciting.
That's amazing. And my understanding, obviously, over the years, sort of guest directors as well sort of come on board. So who have you got this year?
So our guest director this year is Nabihah Iqbal, and she's an amazing musician, DJ, broadcaster. She's a fantastic interviewer, and really a wonderful and very insightful and interesting person. and has been great to work with on pulling the program together. So I'm excited to see how. One of the great things about the guest director is that they, in a really, really wide program, which I'm still proud is as wide and eclectic as it is, they bring a kind of focus and a way of an audience thinking about the festival. You look through somebody else's eyes, and they're helping sort of direct your focus around the program. They're saying, actually, look at this. It's really interesting to me. I think you might like it too. And it's that sort of leading by a hand that each individual guest director gives you the opportunity to do. And every one of them is and has been different. They're whether it's Anish Kapoor or Brian Eno or Kay Tempest or David Shrigley, they've all been completely amazing at taking this festival and doing something different with it. So Nabihah's got that opportunity this time, and I think she's really grabbed it.
Amazing. And how do you go about choosing a guest director? What's the process of that? How does that come about?
Yeah, I mean that's one of my huge privileges. It was the idea that I came to the organisation with and wanted to try and. I've always loved the experience of working really closely with an artist on something, and I never particularly wanted to be the frontman artistic director from that point of view as far as the festival was concerned. I felt I could kind of facilitate that for an artist who was in the guest director role. So in some ways it becomes quite a personal thing, but I'm also thinking about what's gone before and what might come after, who has brought a particular flavour. Do we want to build on that? Do we want to actually change direction? One of the things I quite like to do is surprise people and not follow a pattern. It's a really interesting, fun conversation that happens around when people start predicting who the next guest director is going to be, and you sort of think, okay, well, it's definitely not going to be them then. And
keep those cards close to you.
Yeah, I think that's the point. It should be fresh each year, and it should come in a new and surprising way. But there are definitely guest directors who have created something that we then want to continue, and one of those is Kay Tempest, who when they were with us in 2017 really developed our approach across communities, and we started a program called Our Place, and that has continued to grow and deepen in relationship to communities in Hangleton, in Wolscombe, in East Brighton, that might not normally be a part or see themselves as part of the festival, and Kay really helped us develop that approach, and it's been something that we've then continued ever since. So then you're looking for guest directors who have a real sympathy with that and want to go down a similar sort of track and take it further. But fundamentally, I'm looking for an artist or a thinker or a creative person who is really eclectic, who's across the spirit of Brighton, what that means to them, but what that might mean to the place, and someone that might be really well known or might be lesser known, but that audiences will want to get to know during those 3 weeks in May. So.
Awesome. And what you mentioned there about the spirit of Brighton and what that means today, what if I asked you what that meant to you, what would you say?
I think we've talked around some of it. I mean, it's that openness to new ideas. It's the sort of curiosity for new experiences. It's thinking about a sort of global perspective, a very international and wide-ranging thought process, but also something which is really rooted in the local and in place. and that can be quite political and challenging, edgy and scratchy, but it's fundamentally, I think, asking questions about why are we here, who do we want to be, how can we be better, and I think that sort of spirit of open inquiry feels like it's something that has been in Brighton for a long period of time. I mean, maybe much longer than people imagine, and has really soaked into the sort of fabric of the place, and feels like something that we all inherit when we're here. So that feels to me like what you want to grab hold of and do something with.
I agree. I love that. Look, we're coming towards the end of the last sort of couple of questions before we sort of wrap up. I always sort of, as people share their stories with me, I always look at obviously where they've been, where they are now, and where they're going, and actually always try and discuss around what success looks like to individuals. Like, it's different for everyone, but keen to, for you, what would be your definition of success? What does success look like for you?
Yeah, it's a really it's a tricky one, isn't it? And it depends what you value, I guess. But for me, the things that really excite me are obviously we're all, in one sense, if you're leading an organisation, you're driven by the outputs and the numbers and the impact that you're having, and in some senses that's volume. You know, I want the biggest impact to the largest group of people that we can manage, and actually seeing an increasing number of audiences attending and wanting and enjoying what we deliver is really energizing. But that can cloud the very individual, small but massive to that person impact that an organisation like ours can have. And if I think about some of the children and young people going through Create Music and the opportunities that they are having that might not actually flower for another 10 or 15 years, but is in its small way switching someone on to something which is really magical and special, that feels like success as well. So so I think I'm always torn by actually, you know, loving that massive impact that we can have, but also really valuing the very important and singular experience that the arts can bring for someone. And sometimes I think even if a performance or an event or a experience is dying for everybody or most people in the room, if there's one person in the room for whom it's a magical experience, that can be successful as well. And so I hold on to that.
Yeah, what a great way to look at it, because you're right. It is actually, whatever we do in life, if you have an impact on just that one person, sometimes that's enough, and that can be, like you said, I often ask that question around success, because a lot of, it's really interesting, and a lot of people with different answers. Like you said, it's different for everyone what success would be, but there's still that narrative around the success is measured by the financial metric. And as, like you said, as leaders, as people of large organisations, you've got to watch them numbers, and obviously you've got to make profit, and you've got to make the money, and to actually to be able to have the impact of doing those things. Because if that doesn't look after it, it won't do that. So there is, I'll get that sort of balance. But actually, from the amazing thing listening to you talk about that, especially from encouraging kids to get into the arts and that impact that can have, but actually just on a scale of where you at the concert hall, for example, 1,800 people in there, actually just creating an experience where some people will walk away with something magical is...
Well, because those experiences also, they're in that moment, but it's a moment that for some will be the thing that they rely on weeks, months, years later. That might be the thing that in a really dark moment will lift them back out of that, remind them that they're connected to other people in the world, be a sort of source of energy and inspiration in different ways. I suppose the thing behind your question in a way is that the arts are a purpose-led business. They are a business. We have to run as a business. We happen to be a charity, and that's a really important part of who and what we are. But fundamentally, the arts, whether you're in the charitable, subsidised, or commercial side of the world, they are always for a reason, and that reason is about moving people, to joy or sadness, but to really influence how people feel, and actually being in the feelings business is quite a thing. Yeah. It's great fun.
Amazing. It's so fascinating just to chat to you about stuff, because you can tell as you talk about it that the enthusiasm and passion that you've got for the arts, and it just comes across in how you describe stuff and talk about it, and it's quite a magical thing to listen to. So I'm grateful for that. Well, look, what does the future hold for you, Andrew?
Goodness, well, the thing that we've been working towards for many years now is reopening the Corn Exchange and the Studio Theatre. We started the first feasibility study for this project in 2010, and raised the first significant funds from Arts Council England in 2012. We went on site in 2017, so it's been a long haul, and thanks to amazing partners, particularly Brighton Hove City Council. But we are just on the cusp of reopening those spaces in May, with the really wonderful Van Gogh Alive installation. It seems to have chimed with people as well, because ticket bookings have been incredibly strong from the start. So that will run for several months over the summer, and I don't think I or my team can really believe that we are finally nearly there. Still a lot to do on site, but we're getting there, and it's really exciting to see. So the opportunity to actually have those spaces back and explore with communities and with artists how we make the most of them over the next few years is really exciting.
Yeah. Wow, and tell me a little bit about, obviously, the Van Gogh, from a digital space. Talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah, Van Gogh Alive is an immersive installation. So it moves through thousands of images of Van Gogh's work and explores his life and work, and it's been an incredible success internationally. And lots of people might have either experienced it in London or know friends who have. But the opportunity to have it in Brighton, in these magical spaces, the Corn Exchange is just amazing. It always was a wonderful space. It's even more beautiful than it was before, for anyone who might remember it from 2016 or earlier. It's now returned to a completely wooden box, and just beautifully done. So having this installation in those spaces, I think, will be really special, because it's it's on our doorstep, and it's getting a glimpse of these wonderful historic spaces for the first time in many years.
Amazing. Mate, it's so exciting. I'm really excited to come down and see. Yeah, I can't wait to come. I've seen, obviously, online, you can see some of the plans and what it's going to look like. So amazing. I'm looking forward to coming over and look round. So, well, look, we're going to finish as we always do with our quick fire questions. So I'll throw these ones at you.
Okay.
What one piece of advice do you give to your teenage self?
I think it's just know that being quiet is okay, and that you can still lead in a way, but lead quietly. And I think I didn't realise that when I was younger.
Love that. That's a great answer. It's something I haven't heard. I love that. That's really well. Who's inspired you in your career and why?
That's an easy one. I mean, it's difficult in some ways because there are loads of people that you can think about and talk about. And I have been really very lucky with lots of very generous people along the way. But my dad is the most obvious answer, and he worked incredibly hard and started out of school at 16 as a storeman and packer. Loved cars, always wanted to be around cars, and ended up running the automotive division of Bosch in Australia, and just did it through sort of sheer kind of hard work and applying himself to things. And he kind of instilled that really early on. But I think I learnt a lot from him without realising around the dinner table. From in a sort of management sense, he would talk about problems that had been going on, and how he thought he would deal with them, and particularly getting in the minds of people in his team, and how they might be persuaded or influenced or encouraged, and I think that was a very special kind of training, if you like, in what I've ended up doing, and it's those things that actually feel wonderful to look back on and think, fundamentally, he's a man of huge integrity and honesty, and was really loved by his teams for that, and went through very challenging periods of the whole industry being kind of restructured and reorganised, but carried people through. And I think, those lessons, if I can emulate them even a little bit, were really precious.
It sounds like you're doing just that by the sounds of it. That's incredible. I love. Right, can you recommend a book or podcast to our listeners that has having an impact on you or influenced you?
Oh God, this is a really hard one because I listen to loads of podcasts. I'm a bit of a podcast nut, and I read a lot as well. So I don't know where to go with this one, except the thing that I find myself pressing on people most often is soul music. And I don't know if you know the Radio 4 program. It's a podcast as well, but it's called Soul Music, and I don't think there's an episode that doesn't make me cry at some moment or other. It's the most extraordinary thing. The producers who work on it are incredible, and they gather stories from people all around the world who respond to a particular piece of music, and it's so wide ranging. I mean, it can be a Bach cantata one week, or Sunshine on Leith the next. The episode that really sticks in my mind is a load of Glaswegians talking about the impact that Sunshine on Leith has on them, or the way in which that piece of music has influenced their life in some often just significant moment. It might be a birth or a death, or something that helped people through grieving or whatever. But it's just an amazing podcast. I'd recommend it to everyone.
Wow, I love that. That's on my list. I love because there's something. You're right. There's something. Music in general, just we listen all the time indoors, and the kids love music. They're up dancing but it just creates emotion, doesn't it? And that's the beauty of a piece of music that can just create that a different type of emotion for different people, and people take different things from it up. That's a good one.
Well, and you say, everyone has a story to tell, and that absolutely through music, I think everybody has their kind of particular tracks, their particular performances, the things that have meant the most to them in different ways, and it comes out in this. It's great.
Lovely, brilliant. Final one. What is your one rule for living a fulfilled life?
Oh wow. Fulfilled life is tricky as well, isn't it? But I think optimism is the kind of guiding principle. I think you have to stay optimistic, but underneath the optimism is something that I really believe in, which is a sort of faith in people, in the oh god, this is going to sound really hokey, but in the fundamental goodness of people. I think actually there's horrible stuff that happens, and we hear constantly of people taking advantage of each other in different ways, and I don't want to gloss over any of that, but at the same time, ultimately, most people, the vast majority, I think, are trying to do good things and the right thing, and if you hold on to that somehow, then it gives you faith and energy in everything else. You can make things possible after that. So yeah, optimism and have faith in people.
It's a beautiful answer. I love that. I'm a strong believer in both of those things. Actually, I'm an eternal optimist, but also exactly that. My wife always says to me, "Always see the good in people," but I really do believe that. I think people want to be good as opposed to being bad. Like you said, you don't want to gloss over a lot of whole things that do happen, but ultimately, I do believe that people want to be good and do good things. So it's a wonderful answer. So Andrew, listen, what an absolute pleasure it's been to meet you and chat with you today, and fascinating listening to your story and how you articulate as well, or your passion around obviously the arts and culture, and obviously what you're doing for this amazing city with the festival and the team and everything that you do, and how exciting a period at the moment as well, sort of coming back 2023 and with everything that's happening with the Corn Exchange, etc. and stuff. So I wish you continued success, and like I say, thank you so much for your time. It's been amazing to have a chat with you.
Oh, thanks for the opportunity, Sam. It's great to talk to you.
Brilliant. Awesome. And that, as they say, is a wrap. This is the County Business Talks podcast, produced by H2 Productions.